I'm Josh Ryan, licensed professional counselor, and this is your daily rep, a short practice to build emotional control under pressure. After you react, after you say something too quickly, after your tone slips, after you miss the pause, there's usually a moment that follows. And in that moment, you feel something. Regret, frustration, maybe even shame. And most people interpret that feeling as something useful. They think, this means I care, or this means I recognize it. This means I'm holding myself accountable. But here's the problem. Not all discomfort creates growth. Some of it keeps you stuck. That's where the distinction matters. There's a difference between guilt and growth. If you don't understand that difference, you can feel like you're working on yourself while continuing in the same patterns. Guilt sounds like this. I shouldn't have done that. I always mess this up. I can't believe I said that. What's wrong with me? It feels heavy. It loops. It pulls you backward. It keeps your attention on the mistake, not the potential for the adjustment. And here's the truth. Guilt feels like accountability, but it's often just self-focused. You're still centered on yourself, your mistake, your frustration, your image, your reaction. And when you stay there, nothing changes. Because guilt doesn't give you direction. It just gives you emotion. Growth sounds different. Growth says, that didn't go how I wanted. What triggered that? What would I do differently next time? What's the next rep? Notice the shift. Guilt looks backward. Growth looks forward. Guilt is emotional. Growth is actionable. Guilt keeps you stuck in the moment, but growth uses the moment to improve the next one. That's the difference. If you want to build control, you have to spend less time in guilt and more time in growth. Because control is built through adjustment, not self-criticism. Now here's why this matters. After you react, you're at a decision point. You can either stay in the emotion or move into learning. Most people choose to stay in the emotion. They replay the moment. They criticize themselves. They sit in frustration. And then they do nothing differently next time. That's the trap. Because it feels like you're processing, but you're actually just looping. And loops don't create change. Adjustment creates change. So let's break this down. Guilt has 3 characteristics. It's often repetitive, it's vague, and tends to be self-focused. Growth has 3 different characteristics. It's specific, it's directional, and it's action-based. So instead of saying, I always mess this up, growth says, I got defensive when my point was challenged. That's specific. Instead of, I shouldn't have reacted. Growth says, I need to pause before responding when I feel that spike. That's directional. Instead of, I feel bad about, growth says, next time I'm going to slow my tone before I speak. That's action-based. That's how you improve. Not by feeling worse or yelling at yourself, but by thinking clearer. Now here's another important piece. Guilt often leads to avoidance. When you feel bad about something, you don't want to revisit it. You don't want to bring it up. You don't want to repair it because that feels heavy and uncomfortable. Most people delay. Most people ignore. They simply just move on. But what doesn't get repaired gets repeated. Growth does the opposite. Growth leans into the moment. It says, that didn't go well, I need to address it. It moves you toward repair, toward clarity, toward adjustment. That's why growth builds control and guilt weakens it. Now let's connect this back to identity. If your identity becomes, I'm someone who messes this up, you will stay stuck because identity drives behavior. But if your identity becomes, I'm someone who learns quickly, everything changes. Now, mistakes are not evidence of failure. They're simply just part of the process. They're reps. And reps build strength. That's the shift from judgment to development, from frustration to discipline. So let's make this a little more practical. Imagine you had a moment earlier today. You got sharp with someone. Your tone escalated. You reacted faster than you wanted to. A guilt response might look like, I can't believe I did that again. You sit in it, you feel it, but nothing changes. A growth response might look like, okay, what happened right before that? You identify the trigger. The moment I felt challenged, I sped up. Now you have something to work with. The next step, next time I feel that spike, I'm going to pause before I speak. That's growth. That's a rep. That's progress over time. That process will compound. Now here's the key. You don't need to eliminate emotion. You just need to move through it. Feel it briefly, acknowledge it, then shift into learning. Don't live there. Because emotion without direction becomes stagnation. Emotion with direction becomes growth. And that growth ultimately leads to control. Not suppressing how you feel, but using it productively. This is especially important in leadership. Leaders who stay stuck in guilt hesitate. They second guess. They avoid difficult conversations. They lose clarity. But leaders who move into growth adjust quickly. They repair quickly. They improve quickly. That builds confidence, not perfection, but adaptability. And adaptability is power. Same thing in relationships. If every mistake turns into guilt, communication weakens. But if mistakes turn into growth, communication can strengthen. Because both people see effort, adjustment, and progress. And that builds trust. Now here's the bottom line. You're going to have moments where you don't get it right. That's not the issue. The issue is what you do next. Do you stay in the feeling, or do you move into the next rep? That choice determines your progress. So today's rep. The next time you catch yourself thinking, I can't believe I did that, pause and replace it with one question. What would I do differently next time? Answer it. Keep it simple, keep it specific, then move forward. Because growth doesn't come from feeling worse. It comes from responding better next time. This is still in Pillar 7, repairing after reactivity. And one of the most important shifts you can make is moving from guilt to growth. If you're serious about building emotional discipline and long-term control, stay with us in the process. If you want to read more about it in the book or the workbook, go to pauseandrespond.com. We're in a 30-day discipline run, 23 reps completed, 7 more to go. So follow the show so you don't miss the next rep, because tomorrow we begin to build again. We'll talk about why repair actually builds more trust than getting it right the first time. Less reaction, more choice.